In today's episode, I had a conversation with my friend, a real estate lawyer, and also an investor, Matthew Patullo. Matthew loves investing in different parts of Ontario away from Toronto, and he prides himself on finding the best deals possible. His experience as a real estate lawyer makes him very proficient in what to look for when it comes to anything related to tenancies, any home inspection requirements, any zoning requirements, etc. And he tries to educate a lot of his clients on finding the best deals possible for investment purposes. Please comment if you would like to know more about this topic.
Hi, everyone. My guest today on the podcast is a very good friend of mine, Matthew Patullo, who is a real estate lawyer. So, a lot of my clients work with him because he is kind of the best in the business. And also, he is an investor. So, I want to talk to Matthew about his experience investing in Ontario and also some of the fun deals that he has done recently in this crazy market. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, Salwa. Thanks for having me here today.
Of course. So why don't you tell my viewers a little bit about how you started in this industry and what made you interested in investing too?
Well, in terms of starting in the industry in a professional capacity, I always wanted to get involved in real estate in some form. And so I was drawn to real estate law to begin with. It's also very practical. You're going to have a lot of friends and family who are going to be dealing with things in there. So it's just fun to help them in their journey, especially first-time home buyers, investors, things like that, right? So that's how I got involved in the professional capacity. In terms of the investment side, it was a little bit of a different journey because after law school, you're not going to have a lot of money. I finished paying for tuition, you have debt, but you still want to get in on the action. You see everyone else making these investments and stuff. So realistically, you have to get in where you're able to, what you can afford, what you can get in. And so that kind of led me to look for opportunities of that sort. And that was kind of my start there.
That's amazing. So did you go to law school in Canada?
Yeah, I went to Windsor.
Amazing. So you invest in Windsor. Is that why you got, interested in the market over there because you actually lived there?
I mean, living there kind of gave me a better understanding of what area was what, I guess, in relation to where things are in Windsor. But, maybe seeing it there first gave me the initial idea in terms of why I invested there. It was a little bit more than just that. The familiarity definitely helped. So, it's not like you're going into an unsavory neighborhood and you're stuck with a property that nobody wants.
Yeah.
But what I did notice when I started there at the time was I noticed that the properties were priced a lot less than what they were around here. And so my investment journey began around 2017. That's when I finally went down there.
What was the price difference in 2017?
Well, for single detached home, I know in this area, generally, let's say Vaughan, Toronto, you'd be looking at something between 6 to a million, depending on where it was.
Size, yeah.
Down there, you were able to find some in the hundreds of thousands, like low hundred thousands. Yeah. And
damn.
So the whole journey was kind of funny how it started. So I was looking at employment rates and everything. I wasn't necessarily married to the idea of Windsor. I just wanted an investment that made sense with the numbers, right? So a friend of mine sent me an MLS listing. He found a house that was listed for $60,000. And the rent that the tenant was paying apparently was $1,000. Pictures looked great on the MLS. Everything looked fantastic. He called the listing agent. We booked a trip down. We went down on the weekend, that same weekend. When we went to the house, it was a little bit different than what the pictures had shown.
Explain more.
The middle of the house seemed to be sagging. There was some kind of foundation issue. The stairs on the way upstairs were somewhat slanted.
Oh my God.
Doors were missing.
Doors were missing?
The doors were outright missing. The people had just put vertical boards here saying, "Oh, this is the closet for our dog."
What? Oh my God.
Yeah. And after we'd finished the main floor, they said, "That's not even the worst." They said, "The basement has mold in there."
Oof.
So I looked over to my friend. I said, "Are we going to go to the basement?" He said, "We came this far. We might as well go check it out." So we went down to the basement. The ceiling was maybe 5'4", and the listing agent was saying, "Oh, well, you can get short people to rent the basement." And there was no access to the control panel whatsoever. They had cut a hole in the drywall to access it. And the
sounds
mold,
bizarre.
Yeah, the amount of mold, I don't even want to talk about. It wasn't great. And We went out to the backyard, and when we shut the gate, the whole fence fell over. So
Oh my God. You didn't buy it, right?
no, needless to say, we didn't buy it. My friend was laughing at me because I thought we could put solar panels on it too, and he said I don't even know if the building will stand that long. So anyways, out of that situation, which was a bad situation at the time, we said we're already here. Let's go driving around and see if we see anything else listed. And so we found this vacant lot. It was in a subdivision. It was about 115 feet deep, 40 feet to the outside, and 20-foot frontage. So we thought, what's this listed for? Let's see. And we were shocked to find out it was listed for $22,000.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and the services were to the lot line, so we didn't foresee any issues. And so we got into negotiations to buy that. We got them down to $9,000. So
Was that your initial offer?
no.
What was it, 5,000?
We offered 10 at first, and then we said that we noticed other issues with the property, so we said we're not going to offer 10 anymore. We're going to offer 9.
God.
And they took it, and there was all kinds of tax arrears on this property. So the seller, I don't even think got his money out of it. I think he just wanted out.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so that started a whole other things. Who would have thought you went from going to buy an investment property to potentially developing on a property?
Yeah, of course.
The development thing didn't end up happening for a bunch of reasons, but we ended up selling that for about 3 times the amount a year later. So it worked out there, and that kind of opened our eyes to the potential that there were these undervalued properties. The same time, we also bought a single home for $115,000.
Yeah, and when you say we, who's that?
So it was my friend and I that started to go down there and buy them
Got it.
together because at the time I had limited financial resources.
Got it. So if you're buying a property for $115,000, you and your friend had to come up with 20% down payment, I'm guessing.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and because we were buying more than one as well, we were just saying we would diversify the risk by
Fair.
going in on it together, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, then, that one thing led to the other.
115,000, wow.
Yeah.
Was it a detached property?
Yeah. It's a detached. It's not the biggest home. It's small. It's 2-bedroom, 1 bath. But it was decently well kept. The lot's a decent size, and the rents at the time made sense because at the time in Windsor, even though Toronto was having bidding wars, Windsor, you were able to get properties under asking.
Amazing.
So it really made a unique opportunity.
And this is 2017.
2017. Yeah, this was January. I believe that property was purchased January 2017. And then from
That's
there,
interesting.
yeah. From there, when we sold the lot, for example, we used that as a down payment for another property. So that $9,000 investment turned into a full property.
Love it.
And we went and did the renovations ourselves to start. So we pulled out all the countertops. We inserted the black backsplash. We put in vinyl flooring. The bank appraised the property $20,000 higher than the money that we had invested plus the purchase price.
Love it.
And so yeah, that's kind of what got everything going there. And as they appreciate, you can do things like refinance, pull out the money.
Love it. Yeah. I wish I knew you in 2017 because I would have bought in Windsor too. I remember in 2017, I was buying a property in Scarborough for $620,000, which my realtor at that time insisted I don't need to do an inspection on. And it was a shit show.
Yeah,
for $620,000, I could have bought 6 properties in Windsor if you think about it.
Yeah, and there were a few opportunities that I didn't have the money to buy at the time.
Why didn't you tell me?
I found a building, 14 units, low-rise building. It was going for $1.1 million.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I reached out to anybody I knew who I thought might have money or anything, and nobody was willing because Windsor had, I guess, a negative connotation to it at the time. And so that one slipped past, and I don't even want to see what that property's worth now.
Oh, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, you started doing this early on in your career, I'm guessing. You were kind of new as a real estate lawyer in 2017?
Yeah, I was called to the bar in 2015, so I was probably about a year and a half in at that point.
Got it. And did you feel like your experience as a real estate lawyer made you a better investor or the other way around?
I think it kind of goes both ways. I think having the knowledge that you acquire working as a real estate lawyer will definitely help you in negotiations. It'll help you look out for potential issues that might arise in a deal before they even happen. But on the other hand, too, being an investor kind of lets you know what you're looking for as a real estate lawyer in terms of, desirable qualities, things that can save you money, in the agreements and the structure of your deals and all that.
That's pretty cool. So, what other parts other than Windsor did you invest in the last few years?
So for me, typically I'm more of an opportunist. I don't necessarily look at one particular area over another, and I'm not married to just, I'm only gonna buy in Windsor or I'm only gonna buy in Barrie, let's say. You know, if a deal makes sense in the numbers to me and I run my calculations and I think that it makes sense, then I'll do it. So I had an opportunity come to me in Barrie where people were looking to sell their property. They wanted to stay as tenants, so they tried to make a deal off market. I had no intentions of buying in Barrie at the time. I wasn't looking there, but the numbers that they came to me with compared to values of properties in the area, it made sense. We reached a deal. We took over the property. Again, I was in that with a friend of mine and I. And then that property was fine until it got hit by a tornado. And
I remember that.
yeah, so I mean, you try to recover from that because the tenants couldn't stay in there anymore. You're trying to do all the renovations, so you fix it up. But over the long run, like because you're entering at a lower point, it's done well too.
Yeah. Did the insurance, provide you with all of the necessary resources to do all of the fixes?
Yeah. The insurance company was really good. They sent over the adjuster. He came, he assessed the damage, he did a walk around of the property, and I think they were pretty fair in dealing with them.
How much did they estimate the value of all of the fixes?
Oh, I believe, I'm going off memory here, I believe it was around $75,000.
Yeah.
And my property wasn't even the worst damage in the area. There was one that actually was a full tear down. The engineers deemed it completely unsafe, so they had to rebuild it.
That's so interesting. So $75,000 was the estimate to make this property back to livable condition. And then is it up to the homeowners to figure out the right contractors to do these necessary repairs?
So the insurance company gives you three options. The first option they give you is they have their contractors who they'll assign, and they're willing to honor the quotes of whatever damages they assessed. The second option they give you is you're able to find your own contractors to get a quote, and they pay you the lesser of the two quotes, so between their contractors and yours, and then you'll get that payout to the contractor. The third option, they allow you to do a cash out, but that's going to be at a discount. I believe they withhold what they stipulate would be the profit, so they might give you, for $75,000, they might have given you $60,000, let's say, and you take that money and you deal with
find your own contractors.
Yeah.
Got it. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. What is the best option as a real estate lawyer that you would choose?
If you have contractors that you know and trust and can work with, there's obviously some benefits to doing it that way. But to go with the insurance contractors as well is not a bad option, just because
I would think so.
Yeah, they'll manage the project for you. If you're preoccupied, you're busy, you have your day job, it's probably better just delegate that, let them deal with it,
And then that the job is going to be done right because there's an insurance adjudicator that's going to be checking all that stuff.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Yeah, and there's liability. Obviously, they know that they're going to be liable to the insurer, and especially if the insurer is trusting them as their contractor for all of these possible claims. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to have that kind of liability and recourse if something goes wrong.
That's what I would think. Very interesting. But when the tornado hit, you said that of course, your tenants couldn't live there anymore. So did the insurance company come through to help them with a payout as well, or that was a landlord's responsibility?
They let us deal with that on this particular one. It depends what's in your policy. So some landlord policies will have rental loss income. At the time, the policy I had didn't have that there. So when I revamped my insurance, I made sure it had it on the Windsor properties that I still hold. And that came in handy because one of them had a pipe burst in the winter.
Oh, no.
And they did compensate me for the lost rental income when the place became unlivable for the tenant.
That's very interesting. That's really good to know because that could make a big difference, in your annual cash flow if you're considering vacancy that happens due to no fault of the tenant.
Yeah, and
Pretty cool.
that's where the law background helps, because you read the policy, the insurance policy inside
Yeah.
and out, and at least you make sure that you have coverage so that you have a better idea of your cash flow situation. You kind of hedge against some
Yeah,
risks.
because overall, like, landlord and tenant board is not really friendly towards landlords. So you have to do that extra step to make sure your insurance has you covered.
Yeah, there's already the laws are already pretty stacked against landlords, I find.
Yeah.
But that's where vetting the tenants comes in handy. So you have someone you trust, whether it's your property manager, it's a realtor, to really vet the tenants, because they know what they're looking for. They
Have you
know.
been in a situation where your tenants have refused to pay and then you had to wait for an eviction date from the landlord and tenant board?
Luckily, I haven't myself. I've had clients that have, and we've had to deal with it. And sometimes that puts you in a situation where you're going to end up offering cash for keys. They just know there's a cost benefit analysis and there's a bunch of time that it will take. So I had a client that purchased the house. It was a 2-unit house, so there's an upstairs and downstairs. He renovated the upstairs and rented that out. That was without any problems because it was vacant. But the basement unit, which he planned to renovate and live in himself, the tenant refused to leave. And so he hired representation, and the representation basically said, look, I know it's going to be between 4 and 6 months before you get a board hearing. I know it's going to be another 4 months from the judge's order before my client's order to leave. And he said the nexus between what he's paying currently in rent versus what he'll have to pay elsewhere is worth $10,000. So he said, you either pay my client $10,000 or my client's going to wait for the hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. So he ended up trying to be a little bit stubborn, waiting him out. And once they got the board hearing date, they reached a deal at a lower amount. But that's what happens sometimes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So you want to make sure your tenants are properly vetted. I mean,
How do you make sure of that? Like, I find that so hard to do these days.
well, you can never do it with absolute certainty, but that's something that I like to delegate a little bit more.
Yeah.
Either like a property manager, realtor, they're more well equipped to deal with this stuff because they're dealing with tenant applications all day. That's not necessarily a role that
I mean, yeah, like I do that. Like I would do employment checks, reference checks, Equifax, like credit reports. I feel like when you're calling a previous landlord for a reference, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
Or are they going to say, no, they're a really bad tenant, don't hire them, or don't like rent to them? They're not going to say that. They're just happy that the bad tenants are leaving their property.
Yeah.
Reference checks, I could tell my friend to be my reference. I'm just at a loss right now because these last few years I'm working with a lot of long-term clients that sometimes want me to do their rentals, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I've done everything. These are the steps that I do take. Let's have an in-person meeting as well, like just to judge character sometimes, but it's inevitable. Like there's no, it's people sometimes don't have conscience these days, and that's what's happening, unfortunately. But you do what you got to do to make sure you have checked all the boxes.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's 100% guaranteed. I've been lucky. I know I've been lucky.
Yeah.
But you can do all the checks, like you said. There could be some, unsavory type tenants that are willing to change their documents or put someone else's phone number there. I mean, you could sometimes, if they're a little bit sloppy, you can catch them in those kinds of things, but you'll never know 100% sure. Sometimes you have to go with your gut, after you've done all your due diligence.
Yeah, I actually had a funny call this last couple of weeks. This lady called me and said, hey, I follow you on Instagram. I really want you to help me find a place. I'm in a bind. I'm emailing you all my documents. Just FYI, my job letter is not real. Just FYI, my job letter is not real. I could show that I'm making some income, but can you make this happen for me? And I'm like, what? Like, do you want me to risk my license because you need a place? What happened? Like, why do you need a place so urgently right now? Oh, I couldn't afford my previous place. It was too much money, so I decided to find something cheaper. I'm like, oh, what was your rent? $3,500. So what are you looking for now? $3,200. I was like, this is such a fun conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's always people who are gonna try, and As long as they are trying, it's
I
always
was
going to make
like,
our lives more
just
difficult.
sending you the documents, but they're fake. Oh
Yeah.
my God. I should have recorded that conversation.
Yeah, and you know, it's there's a lot of people and a lot of contexts that try to do things like that. I saw someone once try to register a mortgage fraudulently where they gave fake IDs, and
Oh my God.
just anybody who looks at the IDs, the giveaway is sometimes the last 6 digits on the ID are either the birth date of the person who's on the ID, or I believe they switch one digit sometimes, depends on the circumstances. But just little telltale things like that you should be looking out for if you're in a position that requires you to look at people's ID and stuff, because people will try, and it's gotten bad. So you always have to be on the lookout to get that stuff
Yeah.
before it happens.
Well, that brings me to this recent news that was all over the place in Toronto about how there's these two people sold their home, but it was not really their home, it was somebody else's home. And it seemed like multiple things would have had to go wrong for the realtor, the buyer, the buyer's lawyers to miss that these people were not the actual owners of this home. Explain to me.
So it's funny. I was talking to a representative from one of the title insurance companies because they see most of the fraud on the back end.
Yeah.
And there's been a few fraud rings that were going on that they were pretty sophisticated. They were able to go into the lawyer's office in person with IDs that looked like them. It was the likeness. The IDs felt and seemed real. They were able to dupe the lawyer into thinking they were this person that they were not, and the funds were advanced, and then the money would find its way overseas, and title insurance was left paying out these claims. There's been quite a few things like that. I mean, there's constantly new technologies coming out with the title insurance companies, just so that they can work with lawyers to try to prevent fraud as it's happening. But as you come out with these technologies, it seems like some of the fraudsters get more sophisticated.
That's ridiculous. So, as a real estate lawyer, what steps do you take to make sure that this doesn't happen?
Well, typically, a lot of the business that we'll get is coming in from referrals. So another professional's working with them, either a mortgage agent, a realtor. So usually they've been, yeah, exactly. And usually they've been first layer vetted at that point.
Yeah.
Then you have the conversations with them the second hand. You're looking at their IDs yourself. You're trying to look for any irregularities. You're either meeting with them online through docu-signing, video signing, to try to verify that they're at least a likeness of what's on their ID, or in person and verifying that. Conversationally, you start talking to them, kind of trying to ask questions, because if you get them talking, there may be some inconsistencies that come
Really?
out. But you can never be 100% sure. I mean, we do what we're supposed to, and we do what the Law Society recommends that we do.
Yeah.
For,
So you
ID
would
checks.
verify the IDs and then make sure that those names are right on the actual deed of the home?
Yeah, if they're selling, you cross-check. The other
Yeah.
thing too that some lawyers might not do, but we've caught people like this before. In the birth dates, if the birth dates don't match what's on the ID, because the registered title will have their birth date on there. So if you pull the transfer, you can check that the birth dates match.
Interesting. So there's multiple things you got to check.
And all that. Yeah.
And then what about title insurance? Are they also doing any of these checks, or that's up to you to verify for them?
Title insurance requests a bunch of information from us as well. They'll ask how long we've known the client, if we've acted for them before, who sent the client, was it a referral source you've dealt with before, and then all these other pieces of information that they try to do a risk assessment, because obviously for them, if a fraud is successful, they're going to be on the hook. So we kind of work in concert with them to try to keep that to a minimum.
Very interesting. Now, tell me a little bit about your experience buying in Barrie, because I know Windsor price point's completely different. And with Barrie, you said an opportunity just presented itself. When you're working as a real estate lawyer, do you come across situations where you end up saying, this sounds like a good deal, I'm going to just buy this property, when people are in a bind?
No. So typically when I get deals on my desk, they're already a firmed up deal. There's already a contractual obligation. So even if something looks like a great deal, it's already done. And I have a fiduciary obligation to the client as well. So I can't take an opportunity from a client, right? For me, these opportunities present themselves in the form, sometimes, this is not all the time, but in the form of maybe a client approaching me, asking me, or a former client approaching me, asking me if, I'd be interested in purchasing this, or, in somebody maybe mentioning that there's an opportunity. So these are not yet deals. It's not necessarily from my existing clients that I get a
Yeah.
deal from, right?
So in the last year or 12 months, have you come across people that are not able to afford their mortgages and then they're trying to sell their homes? Like, does that happen?
Yeah, because 2022, once the interest rate hikes started happening, it kind of created a unique environment because all the years before it seemed like the market was straight line going
Yeah.
up. There's a couple blips, like 2017, they had a little bit of a downturn, but
Just a little bit.
yeah, it
Yeah.
came back right away. So now with these aggressive rate increases that have been happening, the problem was a lot of people who may have taken temporary financing with the intention of refinancing, the equity would have dropped. They had no more space, and so some people would want to hang on to their property at all costs where they're bleeding out money. Others made the conscious decision saying, we can no longer afford this, let's sell it and move on to something else. Usually it's best in those types of circumstances for people to just cut their losses and sell, because if you allow the mortgage companies to enforce, you're going to incur legal fees, possible penalties from the lender, maybe not having an agent of your choice selling the property, so you might not get as much as you want. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of either creative financing where people were kind of in triage mode to just stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Or some people made the conscious decision to actually sell the property, realizing that was probably their best option.
It's very interesting. What other properties are you interested in buying right now in Ontario?
For me, typically speaking, I like looking at properties where the underlying numbers make sense. If I'm getting a good amount of cash flow, if I can buy it at a good price relative to what other ones are going for. And that could be for a bunch of reasons. It could be that the property is maybe in a mediocre state of repair, so you have an opportunity to repair it and upgrade it. And I don't like personally, different people have different approaches. If you want to play the speculation game, you can get a property that's a negative cash flow and wait for the property to appreciate in value. I like to get properties that are either slightly cash flow positive or very cash flow positive, because it allows you to hold on longer when you have to make a decision about whether or not you need to sell that asset to move on to another one.
Got it. Very interesting. So are there other markets other than Windsor that people should look into if they want that kind of cash flow?
Honestly, it depends, because right now, especially in this market, things move very quickly. So what might be a good market today might not be tomorrow. And that happened in Windsor, because when I was buying, it was an undervalued market. And the next year it had the highest price increase of anywhere in Canada, and there was bidding wars, and the dynamics changed and everything changed. So I would say, work with the professionals you're working with, work with your realtor, because they might be able to identify these opportunities since they're more closely posted to the market. For me personally, I only look when I'm deciding, okay, I'm ready to make another investment. So I'm not necessarily constantly keeping up with the market the way a realtor might be, right?
Very interesting. How do you feel about buying multifamily?
I like them. I know the financing's a little bit different. I know there's other complexities,
Yeah.
but the cash flow circumstances are really good in those sometimes. And so the right opportunity might present itself too, because there's obviously less buyers in that space. So it kind of gives you more leeway in terms of getting a good deal for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, maybe we can buy something together.
Yeah.
Since you love doing joint ventures, so
I do.
maybe you can do one with me.
Yep.
What other things would you tell, buyers and sellers in this market right now when they decide to choose a real estate lawyer to work with? Other than price, of course, because I know a lot of buyers call you and ask you, how much do you charge?
Yeah.
What else can they look for?
Yeah, I've had that conversation with someone before, because they thought that was their only consideration. I think the misconception on my end is that a lot of people think you're just signing papers and there's not really much to it. I would just say it's kind of like having a good real estate lawyer is kind of like car insurance. If everything goes smoothly and you drive your car fine, sure, it doesn't matter what policy you have because you're not going to be using it. But for those circumstances where you get into a little bit of a dicey situation, that's where having a good real estate lawyer will matter. So, someone who'll be understanding of the way type of conflicts should play out, someone who'll represent your interests when those conflicts arise as best as possible. And, And, beyond that, just someone who has a general understanding of the process, because I've had clients come to me where they'd come to me, and my prices are fair. I'm sure there's people who are lower priced out there, but
Yeah.
they'd come to me and they said, I'll be honest with you, between the last transaction and this one, I left and went to go use another lawyer. When I went to that lawyer, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't call me until the day of closing to sign the documents. Then, even though they signed everything on time, they said, well, now we need an extension. And that cost the client an extra $700. And just that alone made the price higher as it was. They said there was issues in communication because it seemed like there was somewhat of a language barrier. And they came back and they said, just charge me whatever you're charging. I'm going to use you for everything. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. So
that's very interesting. But that's the best kind of like feeling, right? Where somebody thought that they could get better service, but they couldn't, so then they came back to you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think professional services are different than selling oranges, let's say. If you go to the supermarket and you see the same orange being sold for less, it doesn't matter. You're getting the same product, so you get the one that's cheaper. With professional services, there's a lot of intangible elements that people might not know or see, because if you're not in the industry, you don't know the intricacies of what's going on behind the scenes. So, obviously you don't necessarily need to get the most expensive person, because sometimes they're not the best. They're just charging a lot.
Yeah.
But, using a little bit of discretion is advised.
Definitely. So Matthew, tell me about some cool things that you must come across, because as a real estate lawyer and in the crazy market, because you work all across Ontario, what is something crazy that you came across recently?
Well, there's a couple of interesting things that'll come to your attention when you're doing these things. Recently, I had someone bring a deal to me, which it seemed normal on the surface. You get the agreement, you see agreement, purchase, sale. Okay. A lot of the times we don't really get to see the properties. We're just closing the transaction, so we don't really know what the property looks like or anything like that. And this one particular deal, we were signing all the documents and we got to some of the disclosures. And it turned out this place was actually in a nudist colony, which I didn't even know existed in Ontario.
Like where?
So
where in Ontario?
This was near Hamilton, actually.
Of course it was near Hamilton.
Yeah. And so I just mentioned to the client, like, are you aware, of what's going on?
And how did you find that out? Like, what does it say to give you that indication?
There's just certain, I guess, terms of engagement if you're going to be living in the area, because it wasn't actually a freehold, right? It's a land lease. And so with land leases, something similar to where you'd have maybe a retirement community or a trailer community, there's a lot more rules the landlords can impose because it's not, a traditional lease. And so just mentioned to the client, you know what you're buying here, right? And he said, oh, yeah. I said, okay, just wanted to make sure.
So non-nudists could live there?
Yes, but clothing is optional.
It's a very interesting investment strategy.
Yeah.
So then your client was cool with that, though?
Yeah. They knew what they were getting into.
Okay.
But yeah, it was to me that was a first. Seeing something like that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
In Ontario.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of unique stuff out there, I guess, until you actually go and see what's out there. You don't really know what is out there in terms of properties and investment and all that, right?
Very interesting. And the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was how sometimes people like to work with lawyers that have experience of deals not going smoothly, so then you know what to do, right? So recently, I think one of my clients that you were helping for a purchase and sale that they closed, what happened was that we did the buyer visits for the home they were purchasing and everything seemed to be fine. But then on the day of closing, when they took their U-Haul truck to their new home, it's not really in good shape. Like it's not clean. There's like some door handles that are broken. There's actually a couple of dents in the wall. There's mess in the garage. So can a real estate lawyer do something in that scenario? Because usually we want to work with lawyers that are able to like have your back, right? Pre-closing though, if something happens, like an extension is needed or, sellers have not even started moving out, the lawyers can get involved. But what can a real estate lawyer do after the fact if there's broken things in the home? And one of our clients is dealing with that right now. So what can we do in that kind of a scenario?
Yeah, so these kinds of scenarios, you want to you hope first of all that the people who are on the other side are going to be cooperative. So contractually, the person who's selling the house has obligation to uphold the contract.
Yeah.
So things like a broom swept clause condition in there, things that would indicate that the property basically has to be in the same condition as when you entered into the contract. So if there was a pre-existing issue, there's no recourse for the buyer because there's a principle at law called caveat emptor. It's Latin for buyer beware. Basically, without your inspection or without indicating issues prior to firming up the deal, you're going to take the property in the condition that it's in. Now, that being said, at that specific time, if damage didn't exist and it arises later, then the seller is obligated to make the buyer whole to the condition the property was in when they purchased it. All that being said, a lot of sellers, what they'll do if they're not, let's say, friendly or they're not
Responsive
willing to, yes,
in our case.
they might be thinking in their mind that you're not going to sue me because the next logical course of action will be suing them. On our end, what we try to do anyways is we reach out to the lawyer by phone, by email. We try to get the lawyer to assist. We work in concert with the agent because sometimes there's more success at the agent level. I just find usually the agents will have a closer relationship with the client since they spend more time together with the agents than with the lawyers.
Yeah. And I thought I had like a fair rapport with the selling agent, and unfortunately, he hasn't cooperated, right? So I was at a loss, and I was like, let's get the lawyer involved, and it just ruined my client's experience because she was so excited to move into that home, and now she's regretting even buying that home, which is so hard for me to hear because that wasn't how it was meant to be. We were so happy on the last buyer's visit, but it felt like the sellers left in a rush, but also they were angry. Like they were angry to be leaving. Like they didn't care. The sink, I don't know what they did, but the sink is broken. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
and it's a shame because you get people on both sides of the spectrum. I've seen people who, sellers, let's say where my clients were the buyers, and they would leave. The place would be in pristine condition, professionally
my clients
cleaned.
left it beautifully. Like they even like scrubbed the tub and they left some extra furniture in the patio.
Yeah.
So the people that bought my client's condo are so happy, and the realtor texted me saying, please thank your sellers. We love how they've kept the place. And then my poor client that did all this hard work did not have the same experience with the people she's buying from. So it was just not fun, and I really thought that there could be some repercussions, and getting a lawyer involved would help. But seems like there is no recourse at this point.
Well, the recourse is, and that's what some of these sellers who don't care about, I guess, their reputation or just at least decency to another human being. They know that if they caused, for example, $1,000 worth of damage, they are banking on you not taking them to small claims court because they think, just the court filing fee will be $120 or something like that. If you have to hire a professional, that's going to be a cost. Wait times are very long in court. So at that point, you as a buyer have to decide whether you want to go forward with a small claims court action against them, which you would probably be successful in. I mean, in this case, the clients have pictures of the damage.
So many pictures.
It's very easy to prove. So would they be successful in court? Probably, but they just have to decide whether it's worth their time for the amount of money they're recovering. So if they caused $20,000 worth of damage, very easy, sign up to small claims court. You're going to get that. It's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
But in terms of anything else, you require cooperation when it's post-closing because the funds have already been transferred, the title's been transferred, and they are in breach of contract. Like they are in the wrong, So you really just, I guess, persistence is the best you can do at that point other than proceeding with a lawsuit, right?
I'll try to keep messaging the realtor with some emotional blackmail.
Something
like
will
you
work.
don't care about your reputation.
No, I was speaking with one of my clients, and I just basically said, if it's me, I have at least a bit of pride in home ownership, a bit of pride that you're transferring this house to these other people. Correct. And they're going to see how you lived. And if it's disgusting, I feel like it'll represent on you as a person, right?
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking. But I guess not everybody feels the same way.
No.
Or they were just really mad because maybe we got a really good deal. I don't know.
That might be it too.
Damn it, they bought it for so low.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's the one thing I always say is you don't get to choose who the seller is when you're the buyer.
Yeah.
So it's a luck of the draw, and you just hope that they're as decent as you are. That they at least do some kind of a cleaning because they are obligated to.
Yeah,
Right?
there was like hair in the sinks and the tubs, and I can't even. Yeah. Anyways, I really appreciate you coming and sharing so much insight. Why don't you tell my viewers where they can find you? Instagram, email.
Yeah, so usually for me, it's easiest on email to reach me just because I do go over my emails every single day. So my email is mpatullo@aprlawyers.ca.
Share that in the description for
yeah.
you guys.
Yeah, so we'll have the information in the description, and that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.